This is a set of garden shears owned by a friend of mine. Like most tools now, they're left fairly neglected. The edges on these are completely rusted off. They're very, very blunt. The action is very stiff because of course of all the rust. And quite frankly, unless you're sort of into doing this as a hobby, it's almost arguable whether or not you should just buy a new pair of gardening shears than spend the time to actually repair them. But I don't like seeing things go to waste, and a little bit of time we can restore these, so let's give it a shot. Now you can see I got a lot of the rust cleaned off the blades. Realistically, I'm not returning these to a final polish. All I want to do is get most of the orange scale knocked off. The black patina is not really a concern, it will stabilize anyway. So just using a wire brush, lots of water, just knock off the loose scale, leave it relatively clean, so when you oil it up you won't have that gritty feeling that you can get with orange rust on orange rust. And orange rust, again, is unstable. It keeps growing, it keeps breaking down the metal. Whereas the black oxide is relatively stable, relatively hard, and isn't that much of an issue. So now we got to clean up the blades. So now I've taken the blacks with basically a very cheap hardware store stone, about $2. Use the coarse side just to knock the rough scale off the back, then use the fine side just to expose the edge. Now if you take a really close look at the edge, see if we can catch it, you'll see there's a fair amount of damage here, okay? Nicks, dings, just obviously used on rocks more than anything else. Now these belong to a friend of mine. They're going back to him once I get them cleaned up. There's really not a lot of sense in taking the relatively significant amount of time to grind away all the metal that would be needed to take out every little bit of damage. With a moderate amount of work, I can get 80 to 90% of the edge very, very sharp. And that's what my goal is, because these are going to be used by the same person again anyway, in very difficult, very rough, very demanding conditions. So again, that's just a choice that you'd have to make and how much time you're willing to invest in cleaning them up. Personally, if I can get him to 80 to 90% cutting exactly clean, he'll be happy. And I think sensibly that's the right thing to do, because they're just going to get dinged up right away again. So here's the blades cleaned up with the same very coarse stone. And again, now between 80 and 90% of the edges is very sharp. Easily slice a piece of newsprint. There's still some damaged sections. One there, great big one there. And again, in my judgment, and that's just a judgment call you'll have to make depending on how much time you're willing to invest, these are good enough where my friend will be very happy. They'll easily cut late vegetation now. And like I said, in a very short time, I'll get these again probably next year, and they'll again be heavily rusted with big chunks knocked out of them again. Such is life. Now I'll just clean them up and put them together. Here are the gardening shears cleaned up. You can see they easily cut a fine piece of paper towel, which is far harder to cut than grasses, so back to good shape again. So there they are, all cleaned up, ready to go back to their original owner. Sharp enough now that you could actually use them for grass, for cutting paper, fabric, that type of stuff. Probably overkill, but very easy to do with a coarse stone. Now, the thing to keep in mind is, if you wanted to learn how to sharpen knives, tools like this are a great way to learn, because the obtainable sharpness that you're actually looking for with these, in order to get them to work right, is much, much lower than a knife, because you have two interlocking blades. Like these blades now, like I said, if you take them apart, would easily slice a piece of paper, but I mean, they're not going to push cut, they're not going to give you a nice clean smooth shave. It'll scrape here a little bit probably, I never tried. But again, you start working on these, you're looking for a much lower obtainable level of sharpness to make them work right. But it's the same functional principle to sharpen these, to sharpen a knife, to sharpen an axe, to sharpen anything. You bring both sides to an apex, you remove the burr from that apex, and then you restore both sides again, depending on how you remove the burr. But that's how simple it is. And again, because you're working to a much lower standard of sharpness than these, in order to get them to cut really, really well, the fundamentals are much easier to grasp. You're not struggling with a knife where you're trying to make it push cut, a piece of newsprint, or a whittle freestanding here, or anything at all like this. You just want to get these where they very neatly and very easily cut through light grasses and snip off some woody vegetation, very, very slender, very soft. That's the most you're going to try to be cutting with these. And again, 10-15 minutes work, take them apart, knock all the rust off, plane the backs down, restore the bevel on the front, put them back together, add a bit of lubricant, and you basically got something that'll work just as well as it was when it was new.